morning and welcome to my seminar on the expansion of single-use items during the global pandemic. So first, I would like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, the firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people whose ancestral land, State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry now stands. So today our agenda is going to be focused on EcoThought LLC, single waste culture, pandemic waste, solutions and alternatives, and an open dialogue for comments. To begin, my name is Donnie Monk. My pronouns are she, her, and I study environmental studies focused on policy, planning, and law. My dreams before COVID were to work in the policy sector to establish change within our justice and environmental policy rooms. I later learned that my passions lie deeply with people rather than words and governmental changes. I'm currently the branding director and community outreach specialist for EcoThought LLC. EcoThought LLC is a science-based company focused on upcycling, community engagement, community beautification, and community outreach in the forms of arts, crafts, and sciences. It's a non-traditional but essential way to attack the single waste and BIPOC communities. In this screen right here, you can see that we have already established ourselves in the Westcott community. We're partnered with the City of Syracuse already through Adopt a Block, and we've adopted the Westcott community to beautify it in the essence of just currently cleaning up the litter and pollution. In the lower west side of that area, there's heavy pollution in the black and brown community, but when you go up to the college town of that community, it's not as much pollution. So EcoThought is just trying to focus on ensuring that there's equal access to a clean space and a beautiful space of all people, regardless of anything else. And down here we have a game that was created by the original founder of EcoThought, Fuji. And in this game, it teaches students how youth, preferably under the age of 12, but it teaches them how to recycle. And on the screen here, you can see we have a recycle, and then we have the trash. And basically, you have different bottles, different bags, pizza boxes, things like that will pop up on the screen. And it's a point-based system in which you put the item into the appropriate slot. And it's just ensuring that students are having an early exposure to recycling in a world where that's not normal. So to start things off, I would like everyone to know that you all will be departing with the knowledge of how and why consumer culture shifted from the former more environmentally conscious American mindset to the single waste mindset, back to a sustainable, back to that kind of concept of wastefulness. So on the screen here, before I begin, we basically can see to our right the Throwaway Living magazine cover. It was provided by Life magazine in 1955. I'm not sure if many people remember this or have ever seen this, but basically it's basically promoting throwaway living. This is after World War II, and this is saying that, you know, instead of being that busy housewife, be a more efficient housewife. Get things that are easier to throw away. Get things that you won't have to clean up after all the time. So that's kind of where this social concept came from, this consumer mindset came from. The plastic culture has an unusual rise in American culture, actually. Before the 1950s, our country was more sustainable, and most Americans carried their own Tupperware, jars, bags, and other shopping and eating essentials with them, according to different research articles I found. It was not until the 1950s which allowed for the expansion of the use of plastic. And the original marketing technique was coined to be for reducing the household work. As I mentioned before, it was to make the traditional housewife less busy, and it was another known reason for the shift to single waste culture to generate mass profit and influence the world with a new social concept. So at the bottom right here, I have three points from the social concept. And first, in this social concept is a known fact that society tends to use excessive amounts of single-use items. In this image right here, we can even see that in America in particular, we excessively wrap items with plastic. dating back to this article where we kind of created this culture, it's something that we tend to do. It doesn't make any sense, and it's really bad for our planet. Secondly, a rise on lack of durable products become a trend, and this is forcing consumers to keep repurchasing the same products. And the reason behind these attitudes is due to planned obsolescence, which will be discussed next. And then lastly, this all leads to a vicious cycle of constant mass production of single items. And another thing to point out is a lot of these single items are being produced in different countries as far as the plastic, and that those countries don't have environmental regulations and they're more at risk to the environmental degradation than we are. And then secondly, in Black and brown communities in America, you think about unincorporated communities such as Louisiana, for example, and you think about Cancer Alley, also known as Death Alley, which is the alley in which is an alley of a whole bunch of companies that create things like this, and it pollutes that environment for those people, and those people, and it's beyond Black and brown at that point. It's all people that are of lower socioeconomic status that live in those rural parts of town, and due to it being an unincorporated community, they don't have the political structure that we would have in a community like New York City or the city of Syracuse or like Cleveland, Ohio. You think about Maryland, any of those communities, they have the ability to say no. NIMBY, we don't want this in our backyard, but we don't have that privilege. They don't have that privilege in Louisiana or in other communities that are unincorporated. So going on to that next part I was talking about. A new era, also known as the Plastic America. So this soon changed after the model of planned obsolescence. So planned obsolescence is the policy of designing a product to be limited and for that product to eventually fail. The purpose behind this is to ensure the product becomes obsolete, also known as useless, which means that this product is no longer usable, it has limited use. And this model ensures that the consumer will buy more of that product, and that's the long-term goal of that, is to generate more revenue for the business. So plastic is known for its cheap production costs and its lack of durability, and this is why plastic was a go-to option back in the 1920s when it first was like really created through the synthetic polymers. So let me transition this some more. In the image here, we see like back in the 1900s, even back like since kind of America like got into like the culture of preserving food and refrigerating our food, we started doing things by sustainable solutions, as I mentioned before. So in the first image, you see glass jars. This was a big trend back in the day, big trends. But then after this consumer culture and this cheaper design, you know, quantity over quality, quantity over the planet, mass production, before that mindset, we were actually far more sustainable. And the popularity of these plastic items in the world skyrocketed. And I think the milk jug is a good example because it's just a crazy transition from glass to plastic. And now we're trying to shift back into that. But the pandemic also discourages shifting back to that, which we'll discuss later. But the expansion to plastic bottles, plastic single-use Tupperware, single-use toothbrushes, and much more was a big trend back in the day, and we shifted so heavily. So I already mentioned this, the planned obsolescence, the manufacturing philosophy. It was developed in the 1920s. So I just have this image up here. I wanted to go over this a little bit. The image is, I believe it's a Ford car. And the issue with this car, it doesn't look like anything's wrong with this car, right? But the issue with this car is that underneath this model is a 9-year-old car. So the model on top of it is brand new, restructured, like the physical frame of the vehicle, but the interior, the structure of the motor, everything, the engine, all of that stuff that makes a car, except for the tires and the frame, is old. And that was the whole design of the products back in the day. Let's give them something old, let's make sure it fails, let's make sure we generate long-term sales. more modern example of consumer culture, we think about like how that relates to the pandemic. One of the biggest things that happened with the pandemic are environmental rollbacks. So one of the biggest things that bothered me so much, I mean, very passionate about this topic, was we're not going to take your reusables anymore. And I thought that was a pretty silly idea because in this world, I feel like people are still violating COVID, and I also feel like restaurants violate COVID. And how can it not be sanitary to refill something? What's the difference between a plastic cup and a metal cup, or any other type of cup, glass, whatever it may be? I feel like plastic has a more way to contract COVID rather than glass. But there's a lack of research on these things, which is why there is the possibility to create ridiculous policies such as this. This is an actual Starbucks policy they came out with after they claimed that they were going to have a positive environmental impact. They lied about that, and they went back on their word. And a lot of companies, a lot of restaurants, a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses have gone back on their word with, we're going to be sustainable, to we're no longer going to be sustainable. And COVID has been an excuse for a lot of companies to do this. And they basically claim they're going to be pausing the use of personal cups for hair wear in our stores, and they will continue to honor the 10-cent discount for anyone who brings in a personal cup or asks for hair wear. But it just doesn't make any sense to me because, even if you wanted to go into the store, you wanted to get that little $2 cup, they still wouldn't let you. So, I look at this consumer culture as, Starbucks trying to make the most profit, and the profit is less liability, and that's going to generate more for them. And I don't understand it. And I think that being sustainable allows for being sustainable in Starbucks and make them have to pay more to the economy of their business rather than like not being sustainable. And I feel like that's kind of where these type of policies come into place with most businesses. And another thing I wanted to point out, kind of irrelevant but relevant, is the use these strawless lids. I don't get the point of it, because people still use straws with them. So it just kind of shows that even the small scale environmental impacts that they're trying to claim that they're doing. They're trying to say that they're leaders in the barista business with their lids, and the reality is that they really don't promote the strawless lids as the way they should be doing. And I feel like COVID has a huge part of that, because people have this pandemic fear of catching COVID, and the baristas touching the lid, now I gotta use a straw, and they're not really encouraging this environmentally conscious mindset anymore. So the fun part, pandemic waste. I like to say that there's two types of pandemic waste. The seen and the unseen. The seen, I'd say, is physical products, and that's the gloves, that's the face masks, that's the non-refillable water bottles like Dasani, Nestle, excessive use of non-sustainable cleaning products, from Clorox wipes. Those are very unsustainable for the planet, heavily used, especially in university environments, household environments. And I mean, who can even name the million of different types of hand sanitizers that are made out of probably tequila, all we know, but the whole, that whole physical waste, we see a lot of that now in our oceans, in our lakes, in our community. The pollution of it, even in our last community cleanup with EcoThought, we saw a heavy pollution of face masks and of gloves in the Syracuse community. And it's something I've seen for about this last year excessively of. So that's the first type of pollution I'd say that's really bad for the environment. The second is electricity and water. We don't really, the typical household isn't like this ESF students. We're not going to be thinking about our electricity use and our water use. Most people don't think about that. So, what I mean by electricity, when you think about when you go out, look at it from this perspective, the perspective of you're coming into ESF and you're washing your hands and you're trying to protect your hands from COVID in every way possible. So you're either using hand sanitizer, you're using soap and water, but then you think about it, a lot of that stuff is electronic. A lot of that stuff is put your hand under, it's gonna do this, it's gonna do that. And we're not really thinking about how often we're doing that and how much energy we're using to do that. and there should be some alternatives to that. Then on top of that, people being home more often with the work from home option. My sister works from home, so I know like her electricity bill has risen extremely high over the year, and some of those things are unaffordable for some people in a lot of different communities. So that's something I wanted to highlight. And then water. The water problem goes back to even physical products and beyond the physical products. People, it's all connected. It's all interconnected for sure, because people have a fear of catching COVID from even their drinking water. So more people are going to, number one, my big thing is they're gonna go back, they're gonna go back to the store and they're gonna go to the plastic non-fillable bottles. They want that. They don't want to put their health at risk. Secondly, the water system, our water cycle is going to be heavily influenced by these pollutants from all of the physical products, and that's going to affect our water cycle in general. So the influence on the environment, as I mentioned before, is going to pollute our water system. It's going to pollute our air quality even, because the water cycle is also connected to our air cycle. And it's going to disturb the quality of our lifestyles. And it's going to continue to do this. It's already done it, and I feel like now we are going to move into this world where we're backstepping what we've worked so hard to accomplish with environmental regulation, and we're normalizing it. One thing I would like to say is the exception of communities like Michigan, where they have an issue with their water quality already. And I feel like with communities that are already at risk, we should not be expecting them to hold on to these sustainable concepts, because sustainable is different for every other community, and it varies from community to community because of the needs based on the environmental damage done over the years. All right, so kind of getting to the conclusion part, solutions and alternatives. Now, I'd like to think that there really aren't too many solutions and alternatives, primarily because there is not much research. But I've come up with 5 ways that I think that we can expand these, basically expand the understanding of this and communicate it to other people to try to influence that change. And first, I think now that there's a better understanding of that consumer culture from the beginning of this presentation, is to avoid it and understand that from the 1900s, this kind of been a culture that was created to have you spend money, have you spend more money, all for the big business gain, not for the environment. Secondly, to use filters and other water treatment techniques before plastic options, and with the exception of extreme lead pollution. And I think that that's a really good solution, because when you think about it, there really aren't any other solutions on this planet, right? Not on this planet, but at least in America, where we come from a country where where it's not really a lot of transitions into a sustainable future, despite the fact that we may say it, there are a lack of efforts on the ends. And I'm not a big fan of individual changes, because I believe that it should be bigger changes to create a safer environment for people. However, with the understanding that, the government doesn't do what it should do, we should do that. Third, support small businesses and buy reusable face masks. I don't understand the single-use face mask. I understand it if you work in an environment where you're interacting with multiple different people, and you work in a space where you're an essential worker, then that's acceptable. And if you're disposing of it properly, that's acceptable. However, if you're not, and people tend to lose them fast, let's not talk about the drunk college kids, or just the ones that fly off your face when you put it on one ear. It happens from immature behavior to mature behavior. You're gonna lose a face mask. But the difference is, if you're buying face masks, there's new options where you can buy face masks with seeds in them, so they fall, it's gonna plant something, and there's innovative ideas that are coming out. So I think that that's a really good solution or alternative to a more sustainable future for yourself. Fourth is to educate yourself on the place you go and you shop at, especially during a time of the pandemic. Avoid places that are trying to make you engage in consumer culture. You should not be going places that doesn't support people of all colors, of all ethnicities. This is a series of hate crimes, and that's also environmental, and that also influences the community. And to ensure that everyone's treated fairly, and this world is an environmentally just world, we should be ensuring that we are educating ourselves on the places that we shop at in our community, to ensure that we are supporting small businesses, to ensure that we are being the most sustainable we could be, the most environmental minded we could be. And as I mentioned before, our country is far behind the environmental quota, and we must take individual efforts to influence the government to change the industry of mass production, which is basically what the plastic industry is, single-use industry is. It's just mass production. When face masks came out and gloves came out, it was a serious issue, and it was mass production of all of these things, and no one thought about the environmental impact that they would have on our communities. And I just want to note that. And then the obvious 3 R's of waste: reduce, reuse, recycle. My concerns with that, though, is I feel like it's an outdated concept, but I still wanted to communicate it because everyone views these things differently, and some things may work for others and some things may not. There's different solutions. There's definitely a list beyond this. These are very personal. These are things I think that within our community in Syracuse, New York, we can do because we have limited options to begin with. And that pretty much concludes everything. I have a website up here and also social media for ways to connect with our company. And once again, EcoThought is a science-based company, and we are trying to influence the world to go into a more sustainable future by the use of upcycling, taking garbage and making it into something nice, and also by the education of recycling through apps. So between tech and between actual use of textiles. So I'm gonna open it up to any comments or questions.
I thought that was excellent, Donnie. You hit on everything. You know, when I've been in this business, I started my first recycling program in 1981. So I've seen it all, and I just think you nailed it in a very concise way. And I really appreciate that you ended with some solutions, because a lot of people just paint the problems and they don't talk about the solutions. I just wanted to say a couple things. I think the BIPOC communities are impacted exponentially more than other communities through the way we handle materials and waste. Even your comment about recycling, and I've been in recycling my whole life, it's not the silver bullet. And even recycling centers, where you find a recycling center, are many times located in marginalized communities. And they also can be noisy, and if they're not managed properly, recyclable papers are blowing all over, there are plastics all over the place. So we have to be very concerned about that, and I don't think we've paid enough attention to it. And I could say so much, but the other thing I wanted to mention was I really appreciated your point about that ultra focusing on individual actions is not good enough. Of course, we all need to take individual actions, no question. But what I've seen since 1981 is we have not moved the needle on this at all. Our recycling rate in this country has been about 35% for 2 decades now. So something else needs to happen. We have to start doing it differently, and I think it does have to be policy. We have to get more progressive people in government passing laws that are going to make an accelerated change. It is about education, it is about individual choices, it's all of that, but it's policy. And at that last point you had about governments need to step up, couldn't be farthest from the truth. And I also am very saddened. I think you're right. We have taken, we were making such progress, and now it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back with the pandemic. And I honestly am very skeptical. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think the plastics industry is loving this. I mean, nobody wishes the pandemic on anybody, but boy, did it benefit the plastics industry. Big time. Single-use plastics, the masks, the bottled water. It's going to be a lot of work for all of us to get back to where we were before. And it's so frustrating. We lost so much ground. I mean, I could say so much. I do think we need to understand how powerful the plastics industry is. The plastics industry is connected directly with the oil industry, the petroleum industry. So I think you nailed it, and I just give you both a lot of credit for what you're trying to do here, and I just want to pledge my support in any way I can to help you out. I think it's It's wonderful what you're trying to do, particularly in the communities that you're trying to do it, because they have not been attended to properly. So,
Thank you.
really great. I definitely want to get, I don't know, how would I get a copy of her presentation?
I can,
I can give it to you.
yeah,
Okay.
I can also probably share it because I recorded, yeah, I will
Okay.
probably, I can't email you directly a copy just because email
Yeah, it's probably too big.
is too big, but
Yeah.
I actually might be able to.
Well, we can connect somehow.
Yeah, I
But,
can.
or I can get it from you, but I do want to share it with some people.
We're gonna put it on YouTube too.
Oh, okay, great,
Yeah.
excellent.
I'll send you some of the stuff too. We recorded the audio and we also recorded 2 videos.
This is the most important thing that I've done in quite a few weeks. I'm really sad that not a lot of people are here, but it's very
It's
important
a
that I was.
college hour.
Yeah, it's important that I was able to hear what you had to say. I just want to say, I want to thank you both greatly.
Thank
for,
you.
yeah.